Welcome back to the Pro Tech Show. Today we'll be giving you 3 tips to create an effective backup and recovery strategy, as well as one common mistake that you need to avoid. Now, you probably noticed a bit of a format change. There's no green screen today because we've got a guest on the show. Hello, Eric. Now, you are a Microsoft MVP and you're the author of the Altaro Backup Bible. So can you quickly summarize for us what being an MVP means?
MVP is an award that Microsoft gives out in recognition for voluntary contributions to a community. In my particular case, I focus on Hyper-V, but the larger award category is for cloud and data center management. So I try to do anything Windows Server related to on-prem, and then kind of connecting into, there's a separate group for Azure. I'm not in that one, but our cloud portion is still like we manage on-prem cloud, and then I do work with the hybrid technologies and things like that.
The way I got in touch with you was Altaro sent me a copy of their backup Bible and asked me for my thoughts, and my thoughts are it's really good, it's really comprehensive, yet it's really easy to understand at the same time, so I was really impressed by it. And to be clear for my viewers here, Altaro haven't paid for this video, they've not given me any money. They did ask for my thoughts, I said it's great, and they said, cool, will you do a review on it? I said, no thanks, but what I would like to do is speak to the guy who wrote it, and they put me in touch with you, so unless they've tricked me, that's you, isn't it?
It's all true as far as I know. I don't actually work for them either. I don't know if you knew that, but I am an independent. They give me a platform and I take advantage of their platforms. One of the stipulations for MVPs, we are not paid for our work, for our contributions. So
I will admit, whenever I got the email from them initially, I was a bit suspicious because it's a document about how to design your backup strategy by a company that makes backup products.
Right.
But looking at it, it's like 200 pages long, and I think I counted 2 pages of, hey, we make a backup product as well. That's 99% useful content to 1% sales, which I think is a good ratio. It's not actually specific to Altaro software though, is it? Like it's useful for anything.
And that was actually when they approached me about producing this, that is what they wanted. They said, we would like to sprinkle in, because we are paying for this, but we really want it to be universally applicable.
One of the things I quite liked about it was it doesn't start with here's how you configure your backups. It starts with how to build that business case and get the stakeholder buy-in, which is really important because one of the things I quite often see technical people fall down on is getting that business level buy-in, and then they end up with no money to do it and end up with a hooky solution because they didn't get the business on board in the first place.
And then one day you get that phone call.
Yeah, told you so doesn't go down too well, does it?
No.
I'm going to put a link to that in the video description, so for anyone watching, it is free. You just have to go to the Altaro website and it's on there. I do recommend it, it's a really good document. But while we've got you, Eric, I wanted to get your top 3 tips on designing a good backup and recovery strategy.
So my biggest tip, the thing that I would lead off with when you're designing is that we always come to backup as technology professionals, and that's how we look at it. Like, we need to get our data back. Really, we're the supporting infrastructure for the enterprise. We need to cast our net wider and look out at the entire enterprise, what else is going on, and start asking the bigger questions like, when things break, how do we then bring them back to functionality? Because sometimes you can restore your data and then that's just not enough, if that makes sense. So that's my number one lead-off point is you have to really look beyond just data and just the data center and just the IT department. My second biggest tip is you have to test those backups, and it's boring and it's just unpleasant, and we all have other things we would rather be doing, but you have to test them. I have seen many times when we go to get data that should be just fine, and then you discover, well, somebody forgot to check something in the backup, or somebody decided, well, this was unnecessary and it would save time to not back this up. And then think, well, it is necessary, and all sorts of things like that. You just have to test your backups. They're no good if you haven't tested them.
I learned that quite quickly in my career. One of my first jobs was to recover a site that had a significant failure, and I got there and found their backups had never been tested, and there was a problem with the system files on their main server that basically meant it could run, but it could never reboot, and they hadn't rebooted it in about a year, and they had 6 months of backups. You can kind of see where this is going.
Yeah.
Every single backup had the same fault in it, and we ended up having to rebuild the entire thing by hand from scratch, and it was not a pleasant experience.
And if I could do anything, I would save people from that first burn, because I think a lot of us have those stories of, you don't want to be doing that with a gun to your head. It's not the right time. It needs to be yeah, this is boring. Well, boring is good when it comes to backup, you know? You don't want an exciting day in the backup field.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's doing its job if nobody knows about it in a way.
Yeah.
All right, great. So first tip is to make sure you look beyond just the IT department and consider more than just your data, how you're going to actually get access to it. Your second tip was to make sure you test your backups, because until you test them, you don't actually know if you're going to be able to recover anything. What's tip number 3?
So the third one is really to remember that this is ongoing. I have gone to a lot of places where we force them to set up a good rotation, and we go through all the steps and everything, and then they go through a reorganization, or they have a lot of personnel changes, or they grow the business, you know, all the things that happen normally, but they're still running the exact same plan that we left them with initially. And it turns out, well, you didn't add your new business unit to the backup, or you didn't, you don't even know what the encryption password is, things like that. And the biggest part is to remember that this is an ongoing process. You have to continually, it's got to be part of every checklist that you do. We bought a new server. We install Windows, we install the app, and then we put it into backup rotation. And it's got to be part of it every single time. And go through the analysis and all that fun stuff. I mean, after a while, it becomes much faster than it is. Like, you've seen the book, it's 200 pages, right? You don't go through 200 pages of work every time, fortunately, but, you know, it's something that people have to get accustomed to seeing on their calendar.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's certainly ways of making it so when you add a system, it's automatically backed up. But I guess you still have to do that brain exercise to decide what are your recovery objectives, how quickly do you need to get it back, how much data can you actually afford to lose, and I guess you need to have some engagement with the application owner and the business as well there.
Right. So unless you just have an infinite pot of money and you can back up everything continuously, you have to think about this.
Those are all really good tips, but I want to flip things around a little bit. So those are your 3 tips on how to create a good backup strategy. What's the biggest mistake you see people making?
Well, the biggest one really comes back to that first tip, and probably to a bigger deal. It's you have to be functional. Functionality is always the first thing that we strive for, right? Is that we need the system to work, and it needs to be responsive, and it needs to do all the things that we need to do so we can work our business. That's always number one. And then in the process of doing that, you'll bring in this system like, oh, well, we forgot about this, we forgot about that. The budgets inevitably get bigger, the time scales get longer, and then all that's done, and then somebody's like, well, what about the backup? And at that point, you have no more willpower anywhere to just deal with it anymore. Just make it go away, right? And so then what you always find out is somebody's out on the forum going, what's the best free backup solution for my 3,000 server data center? Okay. You know, and this is, well, I wrote this great script, and it's like, okay. And for very small businesses, absolutely. But there's always this trade-off of if it means that much to you, why did you know, if your entire business is going to collapse, if this isn't there, maybe this should not be the afterthought. That is always the biggest mistake. And then as time goes on, it only gets worse. It doesn't get better. It's not like it just heals itself, you know. Because once they get into this place of we didn't do it right the first time, then they just live with it, and that's it. I wrote it in the book too. Is the longer you don't have a failure, the law of averages says the more likely you are to have one. But in the human mind, it's like, well, it worked yesterday, it worked the day before, it worked the day before that. It's just going to keep on working, and so that is the number one big problem. Is this idea that, well, it won't happen to me because it never has.
In a previous role, I used to do a lot of IT audits. We're going and look at people's infrastructure and their processes, make recommendations. And the 2 things always came up were patching and backups. Because no matter how much money or time you sink into it, the best scenario is you don't see anything. So people don't want to spend money on it because they don't see a return. But then when you don't do it,
And so when you walk into the boardroom and you talk about it, they're like, this is just like paying taxes, and I'm already paying taxes. I don't want to do this anymore. Yeah. So, okay, well, I understand that mentality, but...
I work for an IT company, so they get it. One of the founders has this story from her early days whenever there was a customer rang up to say they were having a fire in the building. You know, the classic, you know, oh, what if the building burns down scenario? It happened, and they didn't have good backups. So she rushed to site to see if there's anything she could do to help. To see, I think it was the finance director dragging a massive great Unix server out through the front door by the power cable, scorch marks up the side of it because they didn't have a backup. So not only did that nearly cost him the business, it nearly cost the guy his life. I'm not recommending that. If anyone's watching this thinking about running to burning building, don't do it. But it happened.
Don't do that. No. I hope I was clear in most of my writing that, like, human life comes first, so always plan to not put your people into a fire.
All right, that's great. Thanks very much for coming on the show, Eric. I really appreciate that. That's some really good tips there.
Thank you for your time. Thanks for having me on.
For the rest of you guys, I'm really interested to get your feedback. This is the first time I've had someone on the channel, so I'm interested to see if you found it useful or not. If you did, then I'll make sure to sprinkle a few more guest appearances in as we go along. I'll put a link to Eric's backup Bible down in the description. I genuinely think it's a really good piece of work. I wasn't just saying that to butter him up. As always, if you found the content useful, then give it a like and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.